Welcome back to landofthefree.co.uk. We did an interview a short while ago, and you were fully expecting to be in England giving talks. Can you tell us what happened?
Well, for a second time, the Crown intervened, and when I was in Ireland, I was told that if I tried coming into England, I'd be detained by the Home Office. And now I don't have a problem with being detained. In fact, I think it's good publicity, actually, that people expose themselves when we do that. But I had some important meetings lined up in Brussels and in Amsterdam that I couldn't miss. So I didn't want to take the risk at this point, although the plan, of course, is for me to come back in the spring to have media and other people there to watch when I do come into the country. So if they try anything, we can definitely get it on record, and I think it'll help the cause, actually, if they're that stupid.
Yeah, so next time you can do it as a photo op and a publicity gathering exercise. Yeah, that's a good idea. You're allowed into Southern Ireland. Is that correct?
Oh, I was in Ireland, yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
Although, the Irish do have an extradition treaty with the English, so it wouldn't be that difficult to do that. But, no, I think it's just a sign, Mark, that we're having an impact. I mean, there was a thing just yesterday on Iranian television where they did a long description of genocide of Native Canadians by the government and the churches. And they were quoting our work. They were quoting, the tribunal we're doing. So it's really getting around. And there's from the response we've been getting, it's a lot of people around the world are picking this up now.
Yeah. Was that on Press TV?
Press TV, yeah.
Yeah, they have some very good reporters for Press. Have they ever done anything on you before?
They haven't, not on me specifically, but they have mentioned, for example, they really love the lawsuits being brought against the Pope for his involvement in covering up child abuse and rape in the Catholic Church. So, yeah.
Can you just give us a bit of an update then on how this common law court's been going?
Well, really well. We have gone through several steps already. We have 58 citizen jurors all sworn in 5 countries, including about a quarter of them are actually from England. And we've had a really good response from there. We've sent out summonses to 32 officials of church and state, including the Pope, the head of the Jesuits, heads of government and that. A summons asking them to respond to these charges that they were involved in a criminal conspiracy, crimes against humanity, that kind of thing. Yeah. We only got one response, and even that person didn't deny any of the charges. So it's very interesting that none of these people are contesting the things being said about them. That's a really important point, of course, under the law, because they're not disputing the facts. Yeah. And when you don't dispute the facts and you're being accused of having caused the death of thousands of children in Canada alone and running, child trafficking networks, that's very significant, I think. So we're going ahead this Monday. We're going to be posting online at itccs.org the first of the evidence in the first case, which has to do with genocide in Canada. And if people go there, we can, they can follow this development, as it happens.
Yeah, well, that's very interesting, because under their Roman law, if you don't respond, then you admit. Yeah,
exactly.
So you've actually also implicated the Queen in this, haven't you? The Queen of England.
Well, she's implicated herself. I often say to people, we're simply repeating what eyewitnesses have told us. Mm-hmm. And several people, including William Coombs, who's dead now, claimed that in October 1964, he saw the Queen and Prince Philip take 10 Native children out of the Kamloops residential school, Catholic school, and they were never seen again. So, I mean, that's one of the things we'll be mentioning, although I think it's significant that recently, in January, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, actually ordered the Anglican church officials in Canada not to disclose anything about Anglican residential schools, especially the Brantford School, where we were beginning to do excavations on the ground. So, I mean, there's a direct cover-up coming out of London for these crimes just in Canada alone.
Yeah, so not only are they not participating or helping, they appear to be trying to block it. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, and that's a long tradition, of course. I mean, a lot of my stuff up online, the evidence at hiddennolonger.com, you can see letters in there from government people ordering the destruction of the evidence at the residential school. I mean, the problem, Mark, isn't the lack of evidence. I mean, it's been out there for a long time, and it's going to be out there even more. once we're up online with the recent stuff we've discovered. But I think it's always been a question of what forum do you take it to, and this is why we're establishing this common law citizens court, because we're saying now, obviously, the courts under Crown authority, under so-called canon law, they're all colluding with these crimes, including ongoing crimes against children. So we need a new judicial system, and as the folks in Liverpool showed that time when they invaded that courtroom at Birkenhead and deposed this judge who was bringing in a fraudulent tax. People have the power to bring about their own justice, and this is one of the things we're raising, by this process of the common law court.
Yeah, well, it brings it into the public domain, and it's almost like a last resort, I suppose, isn't it? Really?
Yeah.
Because there's nowhere else you can go with it.
No, very much. I mean, and that's right. And this has repercussions far beyond the issues that we're going to address. It has to do with how do we take back our society? Because as you mentioned before, we're living in a global tyranny, a police state more and more. They're disregarding their own laws and rules. It's time for people to recognize that and use this kind of issue as a springboard to say, well, if the government and the courts aren't going to protect us, we have to protect ourselves, especially our own children.
Well, absolutely. Now, you've got 32 names on this list. Some of them have been mentioned in your previous correspondence that we publish on Land of the Free. How did you find out all these people were involved?
Those names are related to the first case in the docket, which has to do with over 20 years I've documented that these individuals were involved either in the crime itself, these crimes in Indian residential schools, or in the concealment of it. So all of those people are directly implicated, both from eyewitnesses, from written accounts and other stuff. I mean, it's pretty conclusive evidence, as people will see when we put it all online next week. But it's also important to know that the head officers of these corporations, like the Pope, Stephen Harper, Prime Minister of Canada, they've actually, in writing, ordered the concealment of these crimes. We have that as well. In Canada, they created this whitewash called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, whose mandate actually says you're not allowed to name names. You're not allowed to talk about crimes in residential schools unless it's been through a court. Well, these things have never been to court. Not one person has ever been brought to trial in Canada for the death of a child in these Indian schools, even though 50,000 kids died. So, this is all pretty conclusive evidence that these heads of state are guilty. And of course, under the Nuremberg precedent, heads of state can go to trial for these crimes. So,
yeah, well, it's a very brave thing to do, and you put all their names out in the public domain. They're all accused, and there's only one of them who's come back to you, but that was basically as to tell you that he wasn't going to cooperate. Was that right?
That's right. His name is John Malloy. He's an academic in Canada who's used by the government. He's kind of a spin doctor.
Yeah.
A lot of his research tries to go to show that, well, children died, but it wasn't because of an intentional plan. It's because there just wasn't enough money. He's continually spinning things in that way. Well, he's the head researcher for this Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and he wrote back, not denying anything, but he said that he considers that we're harassing him, and he's asked the Ontario Provincial Police to open a file against us for harassment. So we wrote back to him and said, well, you asking the police to do that is a form of obstruction of justice because you're interfering with a bona fide investigation into what's really a criminal conspiracy. So please take that into account. We haven't heard back from him or the Ontario Provincial Police. So
yeah, well, it can't be harassment at this stage, can it? You can't just say someone wrote me a letter and it's harassment.
No, of course, we're not stalking the guy. We're just saying answer some questions before the public, about your role in this thing. That's not harassment.
So have all of these people been sent the same documents, or have you tailored the documents to the person?
No, it's the same public summons. It's posted up at itccs.org. So
it's the one that's on ITCCS.
People can read it there.
Yeah, I have seen that.
Yeah.
I just wondered if there was any extra information that was given to different ones. So they're basically all being summoned for the general crimes of the Anglican Church. Is that right?
That's right. The two general charges: crime committing or colluding in crimes against humanity, and also engaged in a criminal conspiracy. So those are pretty serious charges under law, any legal system. It isn't just about that they knew these crimes were going on and they covered them up. In a number of cases, the people named actually were involved in committing these crimes as well.
Absolutely, because yes, some of them have been mentioned in your previous correspondence, in your newsletters. So, if they all fail to respond, how are you going to take it to the next level?
Well, we in the latest posting at itccs.org, we explained that for judicial fairness, what we're going to do is appoint somebody to represent them in their absence. So it isn't going to be a kangaroo court where we simply try them without their being present. They haven't contested anything. They won't show up, but we're going to go ahead anyway and have somebody argue their case on their behalf. Now, if they don't like that idea, they're free to come in at any point with their own argument, their own documents, any counter evidence they'd like to produce. It's all supposed to be out there in the public eye. So we're giving them that opportunity to do that. But it's normal in a court if the accused don't show up, it's not unusual for the court to go ahead and the judge weighs that in the final verdict that they're not willing to argue their case, and that's a tacit admission of guilt in many cases.
Yes, so you're giving them that opportunity, and they're not taking it. So if they're found guilty in the courts that you've set up, what would be the next stage? What would you do?
Well, there's two things we'd do. First of all, the verdict would be shared with other courts. For example, in Spain, people have the right to go into the Spanish court and argue any human rights court, any human rights case. For example, there was a judge in Spain who tried to have the Chilean dictator Pinochet arrested for harming Chilean citizens.
Yeah.
We would take that evidence to other courts and ask them to issue arrest warrants so that if any of those people were in their country, they could be arrested and tried in those courts. But we would also, the second aspect is we would say, okay, the community has brought in a sentence. We found these people guilty. How are we going to enforce that sentence now? What do we want to happen in our communities? For example, people in Ireland have said, okay, we're going to take this verdict and say that Catholic Church is no longer welcome in our communities.
Yeah.
So they would literally ban the church from their areas. They would say that if priests are to operate, they're to do so with a public license, not under canon law, but under public control. They might occupy churches. They might do any number of things to enforce the verdict. So really the sky's the limit on this, and it's an exciting moment because people can decide how they want to enforce the sentence in their community. So it's two levels. It's relying on courts outside the jurisdiction of the Crown and the Vatican, but also saying this is a community movement. It's up to people to enforce that verdict.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because the Vatican are more and more unpopular now, aren't they? In Ireland, their popularity's been slipping for quite a long time.
Yep. Well, and in Canada as well, the people have said wherever there's known child raping priests still operating, we're going to go in there and perform citizens' arrests, which we have the obligation to do under the law. So, detaining that priest who's a proven child rapist, removing them from the church, and then simply letting them go. We wouldn't be kidnapping people. We'd simply be banishing them from those communities, posting their picture around, taking whatever measures are needed to protect our children.
And I think the occupation of the churches was very successful for you in Canada in getting the message across, wasn't it?
It's really the lever that forced the government to issue an apology in July 2008. We just a few months before that, in the previous year, we had been occupying Catholic churches and Anglican and United churches in Vancouver and Toronto and Winnipeg. And so it definitely had an effect that churches were very upset. As a matter of fact, just recently, we had another experience of that. I went with John Deegan into the main Catholic cathedral in Dublin, and also with people in Amsterdam. We went into St. Nicholas Church in Amsterdam. It's the main Catholic church there. both times the priests were very upset. They didn't like the fact we were handing out leaflets to the parishioners, asking them not to give money to the Catholic Church because of their policy of protecting child rapists among the clergy. But they were powerless. The police showed up, and they didn't ask us to leave. They knew we had them by the balls, so to speak, because the last thing they want is people in their churches, because their power rests on money and their public image. Yeah. And so that's a very vulnerable point for them. And I'd urge people, if you want to do something effective, just walk into a church, start handing out flyers and talking to people. And a lot of the information you can get off our websites how to do that.
Yeah, that's a very good idea. Could you just explain, if people are listening to this, that that you were obviously you're a priest for the United Church in Canada, which was built on the same model as the Vatican. So can you just explain how that's all linked up? In other words, you've got a Protestant and Catholic two organisations. They're two separate churches, but they're basically running the same corporation. Can you just explain that?
Well, it was something that when I got ordained on my ordination certificate in 1990, it said that I was ordained in the United Church, and then it described it as part of the Holy Catholic Church. And I remember going to the one of the church officials and saying, "Why are we described as part of the Catholic Church?" Yeah. And he said, "Oh, it just means universal." I said, "Well, we're not part of the universal church. I mean, that's a notion the Roman Catholics that's an idea of that." So I couldn't figure that out for a while, and then I realized the United Church was set up by the Crown of England by an Act of Parliament in 1925. The Crown of England is a subsidiary of the Vatican. We know that from the Treaty of Verona in 1213, where King John became the legal vassal of the Pope Innocent. And that treaty was never annulled subsequently. And so, I think that's proof that the Crown itself and all the churches established by it, including the Church of England, they're all subsidiaries of Rome.
Yes. And that's where the whole control system and the courts and everything else joins in with it. So, yeah, I think it's a very important point. Yeah, that Treaty of Verona, not many people know about it.
If you're in London, go into the British Library in London. Yeah. I think somewhere in the north part of London. And they have a Magna Carta room. You go in there and they have a facsimile of the Magna Carta, or actually one of their 4 original copies, I think. Right. But in there, on the wall, they describe the fact that a year before Magna Carta was signed, King John was strapped for cash, and he was actually excommunicated by the Pope. And the condition upon which he could come back into the fold and get bailed out financially was he had to agree to become the legal vassal of the Pope, which he did. The Pope then tried to annul Magna Carta because he didn't like the idea of this idea of rights, for subjects. So there was a description of that, but they're quite open about that. It's just that the way history is spun all the time, where certain key facts are left out all the time, and it kind of it's a matter of putting the pieces together, once you realize what you're dealing with.
Absolutely. I mean, the whole thing about the crown, you've got the Crown Temple. And basically we're dealing with a corporation, and hello. Oh yeah, we're dealing with a corporation.
Yeah, I just dropped something there.
No,
sorry.
That's fine. I thought it kind of vanished miraculously in front
Somebody
of my eyes.
whacked the guy. Yeah.
Yeah, Skype's not that good. Yeah. Can't teleport yet. But it's a very interesting thing that you're basically dealing with a corporation that's a genocidal looting operation, and has been for 1,500 years or something like that.
The actual date was the year 317.
Yeah,
that's when the Church of Rome became a corporation and really part of the Roman Empire.
Can you tell us a bit about the support you've been getting, or any opposition to this that you might have had?
Well, the support and the opposition have both been building.
Yes.
Really over the last year, when we began to do a dig at the oldest residential school in Canada, it's the Church of England Mohawk School in Brantford. We were invited by Mohawk elders to come and dig there. We found, after the ground survey we found bits of clothing, bits of bone, and buttons in the roots of trees, which was significant because these buttons were from school uniforms. And eyewitnesses described that when they buried children who had died, they always planted trees on top of them. Well, there in the roots of the tree are buttons confirmed having come from uniforms. So pretty conclusive evidence there was something there. In response, the government and their paid kind of Indian agents on the reservation started a real smear campaign, a real fear campaign that caused a number of people to drop away. So the dig really was put on hold, but it did make news all over the world, and we had other natives coming forward, after that, describing other sites, inviting us to come and help them. So our main problem now is we don't have the resources to get around and do a lot of this stuff. We're relying on other people to come forward and do that, but it's reached a new level when you're opening the graves, and you got the forensic proof of what the documents and the eyewitnesses have been saying for so many years.
So you've built up quite a catalogue of this, have you? Especially recently.
Yeah, you can, like I say, at itccs.org, you can follow over the last number of years how that's developed. We'll see over the last year there. But like I say, hiddennolonger.com has all of the evidence, hard evidence up online. I mean, sterilization laws, the records from government doctors showing 50% death rates in these schools. It's all there. And it's a continual struggle to keep that up in the public eye because there's, as you can imagine, these governments and churches continually try to minimize that, spin it, get their paid Indians to come forward and say, oh, no, we're happy with what the government's doing. That kind of thing is pretty common in Canada.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've noticed that you get these forums and you get what look like low-level paid activists who come on. And to people like us who do research, you can spot them straight away, but they can have a very damaging effect. It's almost the same as fashion, isn't it? You get these... even in the truth movement, you'll get people liking something superficially. So if you can build a very strong... Because you've been at this a long time now. So your body of evidence and the people behind you are carrying it forward. In your case, it's very difficult to derail it. And it does seem to be now a tactic where they get their paid activists just to shut things down. So... how many people have you got working on this with you? Your support network must be pretty strong, though.
It is strong. It's in the hundreds, but a lot of it's deliberately underground and in a cell structure because on two occasions before now, we had a fairly large organization in Canada. Both times it was destroyed from within. It was sabotaged. Yes. I could spend a whole show describing the tactics. It's pretty standard, the methods they use.
Yes.
After that, we decided that it's better to operate in a decentralized manner. Yes. I'm kind of the public figurehead, but there's a lot of other people, especially Native people, who are working in the background who are going to come out as we get more support. So that's, the proof is that I couldn't have been sustained this long without any income unless there was that wide support. And I think that's the proof, to put out to people that, it's the evidence is there. It can't be denied anymore. So all they can do is shoot the messenger. And I think that's what they keep trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's very interesting what you're saying there, because this is exactly what happened with the Occupy movement in London. People came in, nobody knew who they were. They were totally obvious to people who did any research. But for what they did down there was just divided and ruled it all. And then they turned it into this banal exercise. And of course, the people who were really had something to say all drifted off. And it just became a few people shouting slogans. And that's exactly what happened with Occupy here. And I think it's happened all around the world. Some of these places may start up, but it's like you're saying, unless you've got a really strong core of people who will wheedle these infiltrators out, it's very easy for them just to shut things down.
It's true. Well, it can be shut down if we become too inward looking. I find the best defense is always an offense.
Yes.
And for example, right when the smear thing started a couple of years ago, we took it to the streets. We increased our public actions. And when the police showed up, we turned it back on them and said, we would like to publicly deputize you to enforce these arrest warrants against these known child raping priests. If you don't, and you continue to defend the Catholic Church and block the door when we show up to try to go in, you're colluding in a crime. You're protecting known child rapists, And so when you do that, they're on the defensive. It's the best tool you often have. When you have the truth on your side, you shouldn't ever hide it under a bushel. You should always put it out there. And you find amazing allies that come forward. They're police who are in support of what we're doing. I've had government and church insiders come to me with information. The more public you are, that's your best defense.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of typical when a dam bursts. You know, more and more comes out. It's like this Jimmy Savile case over here at the moment. You know, while he was alive, no one said a word about it. But it's just like a flood of allegations now, and people trying to cover their backs, basically. With what you're doing, you really do need to have the police in Canada on your side as much as possible. What would you say the percentage of police over there who are favourable to you is out of the police force?
But I could do a straw poll from in Vancouver, when over a number of years we've kept going to churches, and most of the time, most of the police are very reluctant about being there, especially when they hand them leaflets and we tell them what it's really about. They don't like the idea of, being involved in something where basically they're protecting the church, which has been proven, to committed these crimes. There is, however, a minority that are involved themselves personally in these crimes. And in the case of missing Aboriginal women, we know that the Vancouver Police and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, there's an element within there. They call it the hooker game. They grab native prostitutes, they drug them, they film them. Sometimes these women go missing. There is a snuff film industry that operates with police support. I think the majority of cops, it's like any organization, they know about it, but they look the other way, and so they're very nervous about this stuff in case they might be implicated. So I'd say the majority are honest, but they're implicated, and it's up to us to create the environment where the honest people can come forward and challenge what's really going on. And that's true especially in a place like England, where you have overt police state methods being brought in. This fixated threat assessment law, where you can be thrown in a loony bin because you go to a protest more than once. It's ridiculous. And we have to appeal all the time to police and civil servants not to enforce those laws, those things that are violating our common law rights.
Well, that's it in one, really. Well, we're just policed by our own consent. That is the big problem with this stuff, that people want to turn away from it. What do you think the sort of time scale would be until the dam starts bursting a bit?
Well, I'd say the dam has already burst, Mark. The corporate media have already covered this stuff, but they do it sporadically. They had an extensive interview with me on national television about 4 years ago. They haven't recently because the official version of the Indian boarding schools is now out, and they don't want anybody with another version, so they black me out right now in the media. But it sprouts up all over the world, and the reality is there's so much of this out there now that there's even a faction developing within the Vatican, if you can believe it, that are trying to get rid of this Pope. There's cardinals. They're the ones, the story of the Pope's butler, who was apparently leaked information to the Italian press.
Yes.
That was actually cardinals in the Secretary of State's office who did it. They were using Paolo Gabriele as a front guy, but they want Ratzinger out. And when I was in Rome 3 years ago, I got a communication from one of the cardinals there that they were willing to talk about this demand we had that they identify where these children are buried who died in Catholic schools. So there's always factions within the opposition you can exploit, just like they do it with us. And I think we've reached that point now because of how much evidence is out there.
Absolutely. And I think we touched on this last time, that, once you've got people within these organisations turning against it, that's really the beginning. And then you get the rats from the sinking ship scenario, don't you? Everyone's trying to cover their back all of a sudden. So in other countries around the world, what would you say the awareness of what you were doing is now?
Yeah, I'd say it's greater than it used to be, Mark. We have kind of a problem in that this has been confined to Europe and North America and Australia so far, but the fact that this is being shown now on Iranian television, I'm really hoping the Arab world, Africa and Asia will get on board with this, because as we know, these Catholic orphanages operated everywhere. As a matter of fact, one of the people we're working with now has shown how the Catholic Church is running in Thailand child trafficking operations in Chiang Mai through the front of an orphanage that operates out of the Scarborough Foreign Missions in Toronto, Canada. And so that's going to be one of the cases we put on the docket in the spring, in the second round of cases we handle. So people have to see that this is an international network, and that children are threatened all over the world by this stuff.
Well, absolutely. I think that, yeah, in the past 5 to 10 years, what's happened with the alternative media is really putting it into the public domain. And you're getting some quite high-profile people now coming on board, you know. So what are your plans for the immediate future, Kevin, with this court and and your work generally?
Well, it's happening on so many different levels. The court itself, the first round of cases is going to go to the new year. A second round is going to begin. I'll be over in Europe again in the spring, probably March or April, to help set up those cases, which have to do with the connection between big pharmaceutical companies and these churches, drug testing, that kind of thing. Also, on other levels, we're going to be linking up with Occupy groups, conducting these civil disobedience campaigns where we occupy churches, start community movements to give us the backing where we're going to transform society from the grassroots up. This is how we're looking at it. It's a reclamation program to take back these churches, take back our government, if you like, take back the land. This is really all part and parcel of the same struggle. So it's going to be on many different fronts. We're working on a new documentary film as well, because our old film, Unrepentant, is now 5 years out of date.
Yeah.
But, this is why we need the support of people on the ground, not just once or twice, but as an ongoing campaign. And like I say, there's half a dozen spots around England where people have been actively organizing with us. And so, I plan to be meeting with all those people when I come back in the spring.
Well, that's great. So hopefully, in the not too near future, we'll see you back in the UK again. And there may be a bit of a publicity furore when you arrive, and you may be held for a couple of days or even a couple of hours, or maybe just a couple of minutes. But
members of my family have been put in British prisons as far back as 1761. So it's kind of an honorable tradition, and I'm looking forward to actually if they try to do something like that. So it's just part of the example of how they're desperate. I think that they would even do that.
Well, yeah, because when you were over here a couple of years ago, that wasn't really on the cards, was it? That you'd be stopped coming in. So do you think it's due to the success that you're having and the publicity that's getting out there?
Yeah, it was. I was detained on May 26th. June 4th, I was to speak in Trafalgar Square at the annual child abuse rally they have there. Around the Holy Greek and other cases. So sure, I think it was related. I don't doubt that at all.
So the next few months, we'll see the outcome of what's happening with these people who have been accused in this common law court. Their names are now all in the public domain. Are you expecting any of them actually to respond?
I don't expect them to respond directly to us. Yeah. I expect the response to be indirect. I do know they're worried. I know that they can't deny any of this evidence. They just rely on duplicity and the general ignorance of people to keep themselves safe. Yeah. But we have other actions planned where they're going to not be able to ignore us, not just the church occupations, but there's other things in the works. So that'll all be shared in the coming weeks.
Excellent. Well, thanks a lot, Kevin. That was a little update.
You're welcome.
And we do hope you get back in soon so we can see you again. And you've got support from Land of the Free, all our friends, the Kent Freedom Movement, everybody over here. We're all wishing you well. And it'd be great to talk to you for an update in the future, the very near future. So thanks very much.
Thank you, and I want to especially say hi to everybody in the Kent Freedom Movement. I'm sorry that I had to cancel on you a second time, and I'll make a point of definitely getting to speak to your group. I look forward to doing that in the spring.
Yeah, well, I'll relay that message to them as soon as possible, probably even tonight. I'll speak to you very soon, Kevin, and thank you very much.
Thank you, brother.
Free letter 7. Free letter 7.